Welcome, Hop Nation Podcast, to the first podcast of 2020. Today, I have a very special guest, Ed Wallace, best-selling author, speaker, and trainer out of Philadelphia with Relational Capital Group, which is a division of Achieve Next group of companies. Ed is not just author, speaker, trainer. He's someone I would actually call a personal friend. I'm very happy to be part of faculty that has been trained to deliver some of Ed's programs, and his concept of relational capital and the work he does are foundational to my life and my business, but also to the HOP programs that we offer. So that's on the business side. What I really admire about this man is his love and prioritization of his family, and Lori, his wife, Grant and Brett, his two sons. And it is truly a pleasure to have my good friend Ed Wallace today. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you so much, Corey. It's great to be with you and Hop Nation on this first podcast for your new year coming up here. Happy 2020.
Thank you. So, Ed, I understand your background was actually accounting, but you've been in recovery for a number of years.
You took my joke.
So let's give some context to the Hop Nation listeners on what is your founder's story? How did you get into the business you're in and the authorship of these books and the training around relational capital when you come from this background in accounting and sales that is an interesting mix to begin with?
Well, I appreciate you asking about that, Corey. And I guess it starts with a Friday in August in 2005 when I was at my job. That's a three-letter word to me these days. Yeah. That was my other joke besides recovering accountant, Corey, so you couldn't take that one from me. And my 8-year-old son, my wife had called my office, and she said, could I get over to our friend's house? Our son fell in their driveway, and he was just a little nervous and scared, and she was further away. Can I get there? It was lunchtime. So I got in my car, started driving over to our friend's house from my office about 20 minutes. About halfway there, she rings my cell phone, and she said she's very upset, and she had been an ER nurse before she started becoming a full-time mom. And a lot of things, it took something really tough to rattle her, and she was clearly rattled. And she said, you need to get to the heliport at helipad at our community college because Grant, our 8-year-old, was about to be medevaced to Children's Hospital. He was not responsive. So you can imagine what that was like. My foot got very heavy. I'm 10 minutes away. I probably got there in 7 minutes. And community colleges are, full of speed bumps. And you're going through and you finally see this giant parking lot, and you see this helipad, and you see a fire truck and a police car and all the things you dread seeing. And there's a little blonde kid with his laying on a gurney with his head in the blocks that they take the athletes off the field in. So all kinds of things are going through my mind. My wife's not there yet. And so I proceed to get to this gurney, and they had taken Grant's sneakers off. So I remembered how ticklish his feet were. For some reason, I had a minute of clarity, and I tickled his feet, and his legs moved. So that told me, he's not, paralyzed, for heaven's sake. At that moment, Laurie got there, and the helicopter guy says, we got to go. And I don't think Hop or Covey or anybody can prepare you from a leadership perspective with dealing with a situation like this. By the way, Grant is fine, so I'll take the drama out of this. You're going to find that out in about 60 seconds anyway. So now Laurie and Grant are going to arrive at the hospital in 4 minutes. It's going to take me 45 minutes. And I had my other son, Brett, with me, who's autistic. And Brett was the voice of reason, let's put it that way, on the ride down. He kept me calm, trying to make light of things. Something inside of him sensed that Dad needs a little help here. So we get to the hospital. It's called the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, one of the finest hospitals probably in the country or the world for kids. And as with every hospital, you go to a giant garage, and on Friday afternoon, it's full. You got to get to the top, and now you got to walk and find the elevator, and the elevator opens into this giant atrium. And now you got to go down to the bottom of the atrium to get to where you need to go in this hospital. So on our way down the escalator, I noticed a woman walking around at the bottom of the escalator. And she looks up as we're getting off, and she said, "Would you by any chance be the Wallaces?" And I said, "Yes, I'm Ed, and this is Brett." She said, and she introduced herself, and she said, "I just want you to know that Grant is stable, and I'm going to bring you to where we take our helicopter kids, because it's not the usual places." And nothing really struck me at that moment. As it turned out, Grant had a severe concussion. He's a college baseball player today. He's doing fine. But Corey asked about the triggering moment. And the triggering moment was, here's a health system, one of the finest in the world. Thousands of families in and out of there every day. And they sent a representative to find this family that was in serious turmoil at that point. And I called it worthy intent. And that became the genesis of everything that I've developed. So, and it's not about, and Corey knows this, it's not about having good intentions towards people. That's what worthy intent is. It's about the display of worthy intentions. And the display of worthy intentions is whether people play back to you that they know that you've got their back. For instance, if you think about the health system, they were not necessarily worried about, how this might pay them back. But my wife switched our kids to that health system. She recommended that health system and specific specialists for families over the years. And every year when they look for money, guess what? The Wallace family donates to their fundraiser. So it's not in having good intentions, but it's really about seeing behavior that validates those. And that kind of, Corey, became the underpinning, as you know, for everything that I've written about. And it all starts with good intentions. It all starts with observing behaviors. And are you seeing behaviors? So in business, what are some of the behaviors? Well, if you think about it, if you're meeting with someone for the first time, if they extend the meeting time, if people share confidences with you during the job, if strategies are shared, if you're pulled in the planning processes, in honor of my Canadian friend on the other side of the screen here, okay, those are displays of worthy intent. And that's when a business relationship, even a personal relationship, can get started. So the Grant story triggered me to say, okay, I'm going to finally get to the answer to your question here, Corey. It triggered me to say, okay, I have this great sales job. I was a sales executive. I can do this for the rest of my life. Or I can actually do something that I really, really do. And what I really, really wanted to do was write books and be on podcasts like this today. So here we are 15 years later. We just sold our company. And I guess people get this relationship and worthy intent stuff, Corey.
Absolutely. I think we get it at that visceral level inside of our beingness, that, and anyone that spent time with anyone at end of life, we know that when everything else is stripped away, it comes down to the relationships and the importance and what we've been able to develop there. And anyone that's been to a celebration of life service, the things that are talked about are relational in nature and the impact that those relationships had on others and the people delivering that message. And to me, this is that concept of worthy intent, and it's behaviors and demonstration of valuing the relationship and putting the other's interests first and foremost, at least in thought and process. And, we know that if we do that, there's an honor in that. And obviously by helping others get what they want and need, we're able to get, what we're needing in that in the relationship.
You got it. Was there a question in there, Corey? You want a comment from me?
Well, you know what? Well, let's talk more about relational capital. You've got an assessment around relational capital. you've coined the term and trademarked the term relational capital and the RQ. So people are familiar with IQ and maybe EQ and emotional intelligence. What is RQ and how is that different? And how can it be used for people to help them in their own business life?
Sure. So everything we do in our sales training, our leadership training business is around behaviors. And be observing behaviors that indicates we're advancing the relationship. There was a study done, senior executives, 89% said relationships are the key to my success every year, yet only 24% actually do anything about it with intention. So part of getting to intention is dialing yourself into observing the behavior that you're seeing coming back at you. So it all starts with the worthy. So when we start the business, I kept hearing, well, you can't really measure return on investment on relationships. I know they're important, but how do I measure the success? So we set out, we built it. We built an algorithm. We've assessed 35,000 and counting relationships around the world. And,
so this soft, fuzzy stuff around relationships that everyone talks about that's non-quantifiable, you've been able to develop an algorithm and an assessment to actually quantify that, to measure it, to give a return on investment for individuals and companies.
Exactly. You could take this assessment. Corey will offer it to you here in a moment. You take the assessment for free. It asks you to put in your goals for the next year, which is a good time to start thinking about that. For five really important relationships, just 5, that are going to help you accomplish those goals over the next year. You answer 5 questions. The whole thing takes 12 to 15 minutes, and it gives you an RQ score, which is the measure of the strength of those 5 relationships. It also tells you whether that relationship is an acquaintance, a professional peer, or an advisor level. So we added some dimensions to what we call the relational ladder. And then it'll give you a little report at the end to say, okay, you and Corey are acquaintances. Here's some ideas and an action plan template to help you move that relationship further along so you can become peers. Or maybe it might say you're a peer, and here's how you can make that an advisor relationship. It might just say, hey, you know what? Based on your goal, that's all you really need to be as a peer. Mm-hmm. So it's a tried and true metric. It was developed by a university. So Corey, I'm not smart enough to develop these kind of things. But in every training program we do, and Corey uses it in the HOP program for HOP, and he's been certified to deliver the assessment, to interpret the results. We start with a foundation because you have some idea of where you're trying to go then, and it's all performance-based, which is the most important thing.
Absolutely. And what I like is, so they do that initial assessment that takes them 12, 15 minutes. They get to focus in on 5 people, just 5 people. We don't have to worry about solving all the relationships. By default, what I found is by getting people to focus just on 5, they develop the habits and behaviors with those 5 that then transfer to all the other relationships and that.
Exactly.
And that tool, but I use it, and I'm sure this is what you and the other trainers and facilitators do. You get the baseline, so you have them do it before they've started working on building their relational capital, then do it again so you can actually see how you move the needle. And this is that quantifiable stuff where we can start measuring what has traditionally been called the soft skills and, the fluffy stuff that is very difficult for people to justify spending, when we can say at the end of the day, in a world where almost every product or service is a commodity or can be turned into a commodity, how can we differentiate and not be driven down just on price? Because the minute you're a commodity, it's a race to the bottom.
Right. And all of ours is through the experience we create for other people.
Absolutely.
And we need to know where we stand with them first. And the whole idea of creating a baseline and then practicing, everybody practices, professional athletes practice, but business professionals, we kind of stop practicing for some reason. Doctors keep practicing. But leaders, are we still practicing? Are we still getting better at our skills? And maybe 2-3 months later, you retake the assessment on those 5 people and you see what it says this time. And did your RQ score move? Did you get some business performance out of those relationships?
Right. And part of the strategy section after they do the assessment is developing some actual hard metrics for the ROI.
Right. And so if you guys and you have a team of people going through a training program like this, maybe Corey's facilitating it through the HOP program or whatever, you measure the enterprise or the group score as well as the individuals.
Yes.
And you can see how your leadership team is doing. I mean, if you think about it, let's say you have a leadership team with 10 people on it. And if each one focuses on 5 people intently for 3 months, that's 50 people. Do you think you might get some more business performance out of that? You probably are going to. And 1 in 20 people in that same survey I referenced actually think about relationships this way, where they create a metric, they follow through, they create a strategy, and they retest, they remeasure.
I love it. And it works great, obviously, with the sales and leadership side, where it's very easy to quantify. Right. Where I've also used it and seen great success is where organizations are struggling with corporate culture. Mm-hmm. And they want to change corporate culture. I did it with the university and the marketing department that had been merged, mm-hmm. and there was some issues with that, and definitely silos, and it was a very bad culture. And we used this as a tool and identified internal relationships as well as those external that would obviously justify the spend. Right. That's where the external comes in, because that's where the money comes. Mm-hmm. But the internal relationships, because your team cohesion and your corporate culture are drivers of organizational performance. And if that suffers, your delivery and behaviors are obviously going to suffer. Yes. And we saw great success there. And that's just one of those tools. Like, a lot of times we attribute just to external important business relationships, but a lot of our important business relationships are those that are internal. So for you, it might be your business partner or
a team member,
key team member, your executive assistant.
Right. And the study also indicated that the weakest relationships are our internal relationships, because we take them for granted. They're going to be there tomorrow, so we cut the meeting short. We come late to the meeting. Little things like that over time start tearing away our relational capital. I should have defined relational capital earlier. So
yeah, let's do that.
If you're going to define relationship, it's to come together around something in common. Makes sense, right? So then, how do you build relational capital? There's 3 qualities that go into relational capital. The first one is credibility. Are we believable? And a relationship really can't begin in most cases until we're deemed believable. We find the best way to build believability is to ask questions. Corey's a great interviewer. He asks one question, I talk for 10 minutes, right? Are we asking questions to the people that work like technically under us or for us, the people who work parallel with us, the people who work above us that are distinguishing us? Are they questions that are provoking them to think, wow, Corey's really interested in what I'm trying to do here. So that's credibility. And we build credibility best, not just by the way we dress and the way we present ourselves and our executive presence, all those kind of things. We build it best by asking really great questions. And that doesn't happen walking into a meeting. We have to prepare for that.
Yes.
Once we're deemed believable, then then we can transition from a one-way to a two-way relationship. And that's when integrity has a chance to play into the game here. And that's where we make commitments. Both parties are making commitments. You get a second meeting. The meeting gets followed through. You make commitments afterwards. Everybody's doing things together. That's when you can display integrity. And then the third quality in this, if you can picture a Venn diagram, right? Credibility, integrity, authenticity is being yourself, because everybody else is taken. I always say, just be yourself. And I mentioned to Corey before we start this podcast, Corey, I completely forgot to dress really nice for the podcast today. And he had a jacket on. And Corey, knowing Corey, he's one of the most authentic people I know. He took the jacket off to make me I've got a fleece on here, right? But when these three qualities come together, that's when we form what we call relational capital. And that is the value created by people in a business relationship. So in every business relationship you have, in every personal relationship you have, there's an element of believability, there's an element of integrity, there's an element of authenticity. The more of those elements that we can bring forth, the better chance to build relational capital. And every study I've ever seen indicates that great relationships lead to great results.
I love it. Now, that leads me to the next question, which is, how do we build relational capital? And I know you have something called relational GPS. Maybe you want to talk to that.
I was writing one of the books, and if you look at most decent business books,
speaking of books,
you have the books there.
I do. So this was the first book you did, Business Relationships at Last.
Right.
And Relationship Engine is the most recent one.
Yes.
And this was originally designed around sales and sales leadership. And this one is relational leadership at the core.
Exactly.
Can you talk about the books, and this came second. So what motivated you to write this book? And then let's come back to relational GPS.
Okay, so after Grant fell and recovered, I quit my job. And remember, I'm a VP of sales. I'm an accountant by education, and I never wrote anything beyond a business plan, and I wasn't really very good at that, or a sales plan. So I decided I'm going to just try to take some time off here, and there's a great chance in my life to reflect on things. So I took a couple of years off. I was fortunate that I had the resources to do that. And I just started going to coffee places and writing. And I wrote a couple of shorter paperback books, and then a publisher found one of the paperback books and said, hey, we want to do a real book with you. I'm like, what do you mean? My other books weren't real? And they said, well, the standard 200-page diagrams, index, all that kind of stuff. So the first one that we did was Business Relationships That Last. And at the time, it was like 2009, we were coming out of recession, and sales was still investing in training, whereas leadership wasn't. So we went the sales route. And to this day, 70% of our business is still working with sales teams. And that book, we started doing leadership development out of that book. Customers would say, hey, you know what? The concepts are universal that you write about, and I'll get to GPS here in a minute, Corey.
Yeah.
So can you, can you come in and do a leadership program around this? Yeah, we'll do an RQ, and you make it work. But you really were not speaking. You were speaking still towards external relationships. So HarperCollins approached me. They said, hey, we want to do a leadership book. I'm like, I don't know if I want to write another book. I think I'm doing fine. But they encouraged me, and they told me your book is about thoughtfulness in business. So that was the closing, knockout punch that convinced me to spend another 1,200 hours writing another book. And that book is one of the universal tool, and that book became like a #1 bestseller. And I'm not that good. If you ever get a copy of the book, you'll see it's really, my stories are good, but am I the greatest prosist or whatever you call? I'm not that great grammatically. I have editors for that, but one of the common.
I remember being a fortunate part of that process and seeing early copies.
You were one of my key value adders to that book, and I know you're noted in there in the beginning. And
thank you.
I could never thank you enough for that, Corey. The key thing that was in both books is this concept that Corey referenced called relational GPS. So when I was doing that other book, the sales book, I wake up one night and I'm struggling because you want to have tools that people can just say, okay, I get that. Like Corey brought that right up on this podcast. So I kept trying to think about, people have goals and people have challenges. GC, I'm trying to come up with an acronym, right? And then somebody said, people have struggles. I'm like, oh, GS, that's not bad. And then I woke up one night and I'm like, people have passions, people have causes. So I was like, GSP, PGS. And then all of a sudden GPS popped into my head like, hey, wait a minute. GPS systems are the roadmap to travel success. How about relational GPS? And that's the roadmap to relational success. So it's probably the one universal tool that everywhere we go, every speech I give, every workshop we do, I'm sure Corey brings it up all the time. It's the one thing that people remember about this guy Wallace and some of the stuff he wrote about this. Oh, that's the GPS guy. And that stands for business and personal goals, things people, people are trying to accomplish, their causes or passions, things people care deeply about. And every human being in the world, I believe, has struggles, except for Corey, of course. So,
yeah, right.
And our concept is, the more, let's go back to the definition of relational capital in the model, the more believable you are, the more you build trust, and the more you're just authentically being yourself, the more relational capital you build, the more GPS you learn. The more GPS you learn, the better chance you'll advance the relationship, and you have stuff to work on then. In fact, we actually declare that a business relationship does not begin until somebody shares a goal, a passion, or a struggle with you. Everything else is just preliminary. So there's another long answer, Corey.
I love it. Well, and again, the three big things that are known for and transcended both books are worthy intent. Like, it has to start with worthy intent. And I know that's stated in both books. In fact, the diagram, and we'll share that when we go to edit on here, I'll bring it up on the screen so you can see the 5 principles within this book.
Right.
We'll share that. And you can see in the middle, worthy intent is first, relational GPS is the other, and relational capital, and the 3 components you talked to. Those people instinctively get and intuitively get and understand, and those are universal, and they're cross-cultural too. I've been fortunate enough now to deliver this internationally, as I know you have, and no matter where we go in the world, a universal value is the concept of relational capital and the value in relationships.
Didn't you go over to the Middle East once for me?
I did. You went to Tel Aviv.
You delivered a program in Tel Aviv. That's right.
Yeah,
I remember
and that was an interesting one because that was to technical people.
Yes.
So it just shows the diversity of how we can leverage the concept of your relational capital to different groups within organizations that open up opportunities for the organization as well as the individual to grow and develop personally.
Corey, I've trained over 400 companies now, and I think it's up to 20-some thousand people have been in speeches or workshops, and universally what I'm finding is people are trying to get back to belly meetings. And we've got to connect with that person. Everybody's inundated with technology, and how many emails you actually open with an advertisement in these days? Hardly any, right? Yet you keep getting hammered with those. But ultimately, you got to sit in a room, you got to be on a webinar, you have to be on a conference call, you got to do a go-to-meeting, and somehow create a relationship with that other person so they can like, know, and trust you. People who like, know, and trust each other get a lot more accomplished together.
I totally agree. It's interesting we're talking about this need for belly-to-belly. I've been in conversation with a friend of mine who's in Palo Alto in the Valley and tech, and he's literally one of the world experts on cybersecurity and cyber morality.
Right.
And in that era and this age where, big data and, automation, behind all of this is actual people who are needing to use the information and to gather the information. And, I have 3-letter acronyms like you do in GPS. I have HOP. And I said, I think there's starting to be a revolt. We're tethered to these things nowadays. And people are like Pavlov's dog. You hear a beep and our head goes down.
Right.
And I think there's starting to be a reversion and almost a revolt against technology and what I'm calling the humanization of technology. We need to bring the human element into, these tools that we all use, and remember that people value that belly to belly and the relationships more than we give credit to. We can't use the information to manipulate. And this is where technology has been going. And I think we're all seeing it. Our bullshit sniffer and our sales breath sniffer is on high alert now. So I think, we need to pay more attention to this humanization and relational capital. So this is so timely to start off a new decade.
Yeah, and one of the things that one of the things I thought about is like, what kind of habits can people get into? We're doing a podcast. We talk to each other for 45 minutes, and then what can people actually take away? And they can get a lot of attention, right? So here's a really good idea. And I do a lot of training of high potentials today and new hires. Do not bring your phone into a meeting.
Agreed.
Or if it's or do not take it out during a meeting. So if you're in a meeting and you've got 7 people around a conference table, invariably 6 people will have their phone. Be the person without your phone out, right? It's only going to be a distraction. You can't do anything about it anyway. It's probably not going to be that important unless, heaven forbid, there's some kind of family situation going on. And then certainly, make that point initially. But you will stand out, and over time, you're building a personal brand for yourself that indicates, wow, when I'm with Corey, he's in the moment with me. And, maybe I should start being a little like Corey. And, why do I have to have my phone out all the time? So I think there is a swing back, as you're suggesting. I think people are looking, it all was belly to belly. It all was individual relationships and all that. And then it swung all the way to, we're going to sell things. We don't need salespeople, and we're going to have robots running our meetings. And now it's kind of swinging back to what's normal, which is, hey, let's balance tech. There's always going to be new technology, right? There's always going to be new gadgets, and another Steve, there could be another Steve Jobs for all we know. You ruined my life, quite frankly, with this invention, right? But the matter is the technology bright, shiny object that what we really need? Or is that should that be complementary to what we're actually trying to accomplish?
I love it. That is great advice. The leaving the phone in the pocket or leaving it out of the meeting. I mean, as far as a success habit, that's a differentiator. When we're in a game of just inches when it comes to performance and how do we differentiate ourselves from others, it's so simple.
I'm a simple guy,
but not simple either.
Right, it's simple.
Otherwise, everyone would be doing it.
Right, and again, I think there's a big herd mentality, and how do you pull yourself out of that herd? And I forget who was saying it the other day. 95% of people all do the same thing, and there's 5% who don't. And now maybe some of those 5% are kind of wacky, but maybe some of those 5% have really figured out that. I'm not going to innovate anything if I just keep doing what everybody else is doing. I'm going to have a nice, wonderful life, and there's nothing wrong with being a part of a group or anything. But if I want to step out of that and really distinguish myself, it's going to be through, if you think about the successful people you've known, Corey, they're great at relationships unless you're Steve Jobs, right, who probably wasn't. But he had an incredible idea, an incredible vision, and a great partner, by the way, who he had a great relationship with. So he had a relationship that helped him do everything he did. He didn't do it all on his own. But if you think about most of the great leaders, most of the great people we know, you look around at the leaders in your companies, they're really pretty good at relationships because everybody's really smart today. Right? We're all smart. I shouldn't include myself in that. You're all smart, right?
Yeah.
But it's the people who can connect with other human beings to really make it happen.
I totally agree. And you made the comment, those 5% of people who are doing things different, are wacky. Well, just being different, people will label that, and they do that up front because they are being different, and anything that's different, we think as different and label it something like wacky or, oh, they're crazy. That's a crazy idea, But then when it shows success in that, we look to that and go, wow, that was the critical decision and behavior that led to the actual outcome and the results that everyone strives for. But people don't realize that there's a bit of sacrifice and giving up the comfort zone of being in the herd versus being a leader and a game changer. And if you want to be a game changer, like I have on the poster, you have to lead out of the comfort zone and be a little different and wacky. I love the term wacky.
I was going to refer to that, and you already did, so I won't, but thank you. I was going to refer to what's right behind your head right now.
Awesome. So
you like my background? It's the back of our office. I couldn't find the room with the bookcase was taken, so I couldn't use that one.
Yeah. It looks good. Well, very corporate. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm corporate now.
Yeah. So tell me about your own big goals. Like you've now taken the bold leap of moving from the JOB 2 years to transitioning to building this company, selling the company, now continuing to service and do the stuff you love even more without the obligation of the operational stuff. That's,
that was the whole point.
What you were able to do by selling. You still get to do the training and writing and lead and mentor, others out there and people like myself. What are some major life goals you have at this stage of the game we call life?
Well, we talked, you kind of touched on a little bit earlier. Everybody has a dash, and there was a book written about it. And my dash started in 1959, and I'm kind of getting a little longer than some people. So I've been able to accomplish a lot of things that I would have never dreamed about. So when I think about, okay, what's a life goal at this point? It's to remain relevant. I think that's my main life goal.
What does that mean to you, Ed?
Well, I get to travel. I'm traveling all over the world now, right? And to work with a group of people, say in Ireland, who are from all over Europe, and have them email you afterwards and talk about an impact that you had or an idea they're using, to be with 100 new sales producers for an insurance carrier, and for them to feel like he's not this old guy with these old ideas, and that he's actually kind of cool and funny, which my wife doesn't think I'm funny, but as long as the audiences think I'm funny, I guess I'm funny. That's what I mean. And that I talked about worthy intent, and it's about behavior. So relevance to me is not that everybody liked it in the moment or liked the training, but when you start getting some unsolicited perspective, and it's so funny. I did a speech in New York recently for the Chemist Club, right? So we do a lot of training. They seem to like our stuff. And there was a social, and I was speaking at the social. It was their big annual dinner. And there was a young lady there who I was in a class that I taught for this one chemical company. And, everybody's in cocktail dresses and suits, so you don't recognize each other, but I recognized her, and she was the star of the class. And I talked to her from a couple people away. I said, "Naomi, how are you doing?" And she goes, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And she came over and gave me this big hug, and she started telling me about her mom and how she's doing with her job in Atlanta. And then she wanted pictures, and she started posting the pictures to all the people at her company. Because so those are the kind of things that, you cannot measure. So the two big goals for me, okay, number one is to remain relevant, and number two is to keep traveling. And everybody's like, "What? You're kidding me?" And I'm like, no, the more flights a week, the better for me. I have a great relationship with my wife. It has nothing to do with that. But my boys are both kind of doing their own thing now. My wife actually started working as a nurse again. And I love meeting people on planes. I love stopping in airports and talking, because we're all kind of going through the same thing if the plane's late. So I guess those are I don't know if they're the greatest goals, but those are the things I want to keep doing.
I love it. Well, and at the end of the day, what you talked about talks to the integrity and congruency you have, because they were all relational goals.
That's true.
I love that. I love that. Now, you've shared with me a unique goal you have, and I'm going to bring it up again. Mini golf course. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you're going to go there, right?
Well, we don't have to, but I know.
No, I want to. I can't believe you remember that.
So I love this as a goal, and it speaks to what I said in the intro. Like, yes, obviously on a business standpoint, you've won me over personally, and but this Ed as a person side that I've been privileged enough to get to know,
right.
That sort of goal and the motivation behind that, because I've shared with you my one book, No Leap Webfoot, how this resonates. So tell me about this goal of a mini golf course that you want to co-own with your son, Brett.
Okay, thank you. And that just speaks to you, Corey, that you remember these things, and that's why you're so successful, and people glom onto you. That's why there's an attraction around Corey.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So when we have our older son he's got autism, but he has like a job at the movie theater, and before that he worked in a restaurant, but difficult time with academics. So as you're getting older, you're thinking, okay, well, our younger son he's a college baseball player. He's worked for the Philadelphia Phillies for the last 3 summers. He's going to do something pretty cool with his life. And what about when we're maybe not around or too old or whatever? So we have this family goal to accumulate enough resources to open a mini golf course somewhere in the area of where we live, which there's like one in the entire county. So I know the market's there, right? And that would be something that through a trust, our son Brett used to go to work every day. He wouldn't have to worry about losing his job. There would certainly be someone running the place, but it would give him a chance to socialize and have a sense of a really nice life. So above our bed, there is a note that says X amount of money by this date for a golf course that we're going to call King Putt. So there you go. You pulled it out of me, Corey. Don't anybody else use King Putt. That's our trademark.
Yeah, I love it. I hadn't heard the name before. I
thought I told you that. Sorry. Yeah, King Putt.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is such a great story, and it speaks to so much and you are the master storyteller too. I think you've heard that feedback before. You even talked about how that's the gift you have in the books you write, because you not only give very concrete concepts and ideas, but you give a narrative for people to connect with and make it something real, which is an art. And as an author myself, that is something very difficult to do, and you are a master at it.
Oh, I truly appreciate that, and people learn from stories. I think it's another great habit for people to tell a story sometimes in some kind of situation, and it really humanizes people. In my case, I try to tell some stories that are self-deprecating. I think that also helps when you're in front of a group of people. But I really think people love that they can connect somebody to. Corey knows about, in one of my books, there's a cab driver named Max. He is a foundational underpinning to a lot of the training we do, and how he created what we call a competitor-proof experience with a simple set of taxi rides back and forth to the Philadelphia airport. So, if you can find a good, everybody's got a story, Corey, right? Everybody has a story. So I'm sure if you just think about it, I think people like hearing those stories. And if you can come up with a couple of those for different scenarios, I think people will support you. You'll get more influence and all the great stuff that goes with that.
I love it. So many nuggets you've shared in this time frame. A lot more. I would encourage people, get those 2 books. If budget warrants, you can only buy one. This is the book that I recommend. We will provide links on the podcast here below in the show notes. I want to thank you, Ed, and end with one last question.
Sure.
If you're sitting down celebrating your 100th birthday celebration, who do you want there, and what would you want them saying about you?
Man, that's a toughie.
It's the big one.
I would, you know what? If my 2 kids and my wife are the only people there, and they felt that I enriched their lives, I think that would be enough for me. I need a big service someday with 100 people there or whatever, now, Corey, you want to fly across the country for my services, you go right ahead and do that. But I think if just the people closest to me, because I've had the opportunity to meet tens of thousands of people, and I aggregate friends, as you know.
Yes.
And I don't think it would be possible for me to list the people and prioritize the ones I want to have there, because the gift was while I was with them, while I was here, and relevant. So I think if those 3 people were there, and our 2 dogs.
What type of dogs?
Oh my goodness gracious! You shouldn't have gone there. We have a Sheltie we do rescue dogs, and we have a Sheltie, and his name is Dylan. And I don't know why Brett named him Dylan, but he's dog Dylan. But the second one is a female dog, and her name is Hannah. And Hannah is a combination. Are you ready for this, Corey? Lab Jack Russell.
Oh my goodness.
So
I don't even want to get the visual of how that comes about.
Yeah, I think the Jack Russell father, from what the shelter told us.
I hope so.
but picture a 50-pound dog, all black.
Wow.
They can jump literally 3 feet straight up in the air, like off the.
That's awesome.
And my wife, she'll say, don't get mad at her. She can't help the way she was born. And I'm like, well, that's really not to say.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, if I'm traveling through there, with the family and a big motorhome, and we have Professor Badinsky, or Buddy, our little French bulldog.
Yeah.
Look forward
I remember that. Yeah.
the entire family's meeting.
Yeah. Well, you come through Philly, you come and see Hannah and Dylan.
I would love to. Hopefully it's at a point when you've opened up King Putt.
We'll have a grand opening. Everybody will know about it. Trust me, you'll all get coupons.
I am looking forward to that. I want to thank you for your time today, Ed, and thank you, Hop Nation. Any final comments that you want to say before we sign off, Ed?
We have a new year starting, and everyone tries to do things a little differently in the new year. I wouldn't allow myself to be bound by, let's say it's February and you still haven't changed a few things. Allow myself to be bound by that. The beginning of the year is just a date. There's no reason you can't do more physical activity starting April 1st, or work on that book you want to write, March 1st. There should be no time bound because of the calendar, and it's a new year, and I'm going to do things differently. You can always start whatever, and you can always stop whenever you're ready. So I just wouldn't allow January 1st, 2020 to bind me in any way. I hope that's helpful.
I love it. That is hugely helpful. And for Hop Nation who's listening, we're recording this December 31st. So you're going to see it in the new year, but we're here on New Year's Eve, which is actually my anniversary. So shortly after this, I have another couple hours here in the office. And then I'm signing off because I'm spending time with my family today for New Year's, but also to celebrate my 13th wedding anniversary with my wonderful wife, Angela, and daughters, Faith and Anna.
Oh my gosh, happy anniversary. I didn't know that, and I'll remember that now for next year. Have a great time tonight.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ed, and thank you, Hop Nation.
Thank you, Hop Nation. Take care.